My name is Alma. I'm 28 years old, and right now I'm standing outside my sister's home office holding a tray with her favorite pot roast. Just yesterday, Bridget threw a crystal glass at my face during a family meeting about our mother's will. It missed by inches, exploding against the wall behind me. But I'm not here for revenge or reconciliation. I'm here because I found something in our late father's study that explains why she's been desperately trying to change Mom's will before anyone discovers her secret. Before we dive into this incredible story of family betrayal and hidden truths, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Are you dealing with family drama of your own? Please hit that like button if you've ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that will leave you speechless. What would you do if you discovered your own sibling had been living a double life? Let's find out what happened when I decided to serve my sister more than just lunch. 3 weeks ago, my mother Dorothy passed away after a brutal 6-month battle with pancreatic cancer. I had been her primary caregiver, taking a leave of absence from my job as a marketing director to be with her during those final months. The funeral was beautiful, with hundreds of people sharing memories of the woman who had taught kindergarten in our small Connecticut town for 30 years. Bridget flew in from Boston with her husband Doug and their 3 kids, playing the role of the grieving eldest daughter perfectly. Everything changed the day we gathered in lawyer Mitchell Crawford's office for the reading of the will. I sat there between Bridget and our Aunt Helen, still numb from grief, expecting a straightforward division of Mom's modest estate. What happened next shattered our family. Mitchell cleared his throat and read the words that would ignite a war. I was to inherit the family home in Fairfield and 60% of all financial assets. Bridget would receive 40%. The room went silent, then erupted. This is insane. Bridget shot up from her chair, her face flushing red. I'm the oldest. I have 3 children. Alma is single with no responsibilities. Doug tried to calm her, but she shook him off. Mom wasn't in her right mind. The cancer, the medications, they affected her judgment. Alma was there every day, whispering in her ear, turning her against me. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. I had spent months watching our mother fade away, holding her hand through chemotherapy, cleaning up when she couldn't make it to the bathroom, reading her favorite novels when the pain kept her awake at night. The suggestion that I had manipulated her during her most vulnerable moments was beyond cruel. Bridget, you visited her twice in 6 months, I said quietly. I never asked for anything. I just wanted to be there for her. But Bridget had already made up her mind. Within days, she launched a campaign to contest the will. She hired Pauline Stark, known as the most aggressive estate attorney in Connecticut. Our relatives began choosing sides. Aunt Helen and Uncle Ray, swayed by Bridget's tears and accusations, aligned themselves with her. It's just not natural, Aunt Helen told anyone who would listen. A mother doesn't favor one daughter over another without undue influence. My cousin Lisa called me one evening, her voice hushed and urgent. Alma, you need to know what Bridget's planning. She's been meeting with lawyers, private investigators. She's determined to prove you manipulated Aunt Dorothy. She keeps saying you isolated Mom from the family, that you controlled her medications to keep her confused. The betrayal cut deep, but what Lisa said next chilled me. She's been spreading these stories all over town. People at Mom's church, her former colleagues, everyone thinks you're some kind of gold digger who preyed on a dying woman. The character assassination was systematic and brutal. I began receiving cold stares at the grocery store. Friends stopped returning my calls. My mother's best friend, June Palmer, confronted me after church, tears streaming down her face. How could you do that to Dorothy? She loved both her girls equally. No amount of explanation could penetrate the poison Bridget had spread. Yesterday's family meeting was supposed to be an attempt at mediation. Mitchell Crawford had suggested we gather at Aunt Helen's house to discuss the situation rationally. I arrived hopeful that we could find some middle ground, some way to honor our mother's wishes without destroying what remained of our family. Instead, I walked into an ambush. Bridget had prepared a presentation, complete with printed emails and bank statements, allegedly showing how I had systematically isolated our mother from the rest of the family. "Look at this pattern," Bridget announced, pointing to a timeline on her laptop. "Every time I tried to visit, Alma suddenly claimed Mom was too sick. Every family gathering, Alma insisted Mom needed to rest. She controlled access like a prison warden." The room was packed with relatives I hadn't seen in months, all nodding along to Bridget's narrative. When I tried to explain that Mom's oncologist had recommended limiting visitors during her weakest periods, Bridget laughed bitterly. "Of course you have an answer for everything. You've had months to perfect your story." She stood up, pacing now, working herself into a fury. "You know what I think? I think you couldn't stand that Mom loved my children more than you. You couldn't stand that I had the life you wanted. So you waited until she was weak and poisoned her against me and my family. That's a lie and you know it." I finally snapped, my composure cracking. "You abandoned her when she needed you most. You were too busy with your perfect life in Boston to care about what she was going through. I was there because I loved her, not because I wanted her money." That's when Bridget grabbed the heavy crystal water glass from the table. For a moment, time seemed to slow as she drew her arm back and hurled it directly at my face. I jerked sideways just in time, feeling the wind of it passing my cheek, before it exploded against Aunt Helen's dining room wall. Glass shards scattered across the floor as everyone sat frozen in shock. Even Bridget seemed stunned by her own violence, her hand still extended in the air. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking, but my mind suddenly clear. "I'm done," I said, looking around the room at the faces of people I had once considered family. "You can all believe whatever lies make you feel better about abandoning Mom when she needed you. But I know the truth, and so did she." I walked out of that house knowing something had fundamentally changed. Bridget had declared war, and she was willing to do anything to win. What she didn't know was that I was about to discover something that would change everything. The next morning, I drove to our family home in Fairfield with a heavy heart and a box of empty folders. My lawyer had advised me to gather all of Mom's financial documents, medical records, and correspondence to build a defense against Bridget's accusations. The house felt different now, not just empty of Mom's presence, but somehow hostile, as if it knew the family it had sheltered for 40 years was tearing itself apart within its walls. I started in Mom's bedroom, methodically sorting through her desk drawers, finding nothing more dramatic than old Christmas cards and grocery lists in her careful handwriting. The real work waited in Dad's old study, a room that had remained largely untouched since his death 5 years earlier. Mom had cleaned it occasionally, but never changed anything, preserving it like a shrine to the man who had built his small accounting firm from nothing into a respected local business. The study smelled of Dad's cologne and old leather, bringing back memories of childhood days when I would sneak in to watch him work, fascinated by the adding machine and precise columns of numbers. I began with the filing cabinets, pulling out tax returns and bank statements dating back decades. It was while trying to close a sticky drawer that I noticed something odd. The bottom of the drawer seemed higher than it should be, leaving less space than the other drawers in the same cabinet. My fingers found a small latch hidden under the back edge. When I pressed it, the false bottom lifted away, revealing a compartment I never knew existed. Inside were several manila envelopes, each marked with a year, starting from 7 years ago, and ending just months before Dad's fatal heart attack. My hands trembled as I opened the first envelope and found a stack of letters. The top one was in Bridget's handwriting, addressed to Dad. "I know what you found out," the first line read, "but please let me explain before you do anything rash." My blood ran cold as I continued reading. The letter was Bridget's confession about taking money from Dad's accounting firm, money she claimed to need for Doug's struggling construction business. She begged for forgiveness, promised to pay it back, swore it would never happen again. But as I read through the correspondence, a different story emerged. Letter after letter revealed an escalating pattern of theft and deception. Bridget hadn't just borrowed money, she had systematically embezzled from client accounts over 3 years. The amounts started small, a few thousand here and there, but grew to tens of thousands as she became bolder. Dad's responses, written in his precise accountant's hand but never sent, showed a man torn between his professional integrity and his love for his daughter. "You have betrayed not just me but the clients who trusted us," one draft read. "How can I face Harold Morrison knowing you stole from his retirement fund?" The final envelope contained the smoking gun, bank statements, cancelled checks, and a detailed spreadsheet in Dad's handwriting documenting exactly how much Bridget had taken. The total made me gasp. $300,000 over 3 years. But it was the last document that explained everything. A handwritten note from Dad to Mom, dated just a week before his heart attack. "Dorothy, if something happens to me, you must protect Alma. I've changed my will to ensure she receives the majority of our assets. Bridget has shown she cannot be trusted with money. I've covered the losses to protect our clients and our reputation, but I cannot reward theft with inheritance. Please forgive me for keeping this from you. I thought I could handle it alone." I sat on the floor of that study, surrounded by evidence of a betrayal I never imagined possible. Everything made sense now. Bridget's desperation to contest the will, her accusations of manipulation, her certainty that something unfair had occurred. She knew Dad had discovered her embezzlement. She must have lived in fear for years that he would expose her, only to breathe relief when he died without revealing her secret. But the will had been her undoing. Mom must have known too, must have understood why Dad had made the choices he did. My phone rang, startling me from my shocked stupor. It was Stanley Fredericks, Dad's former business partner, who had bought out his share of the firm after his death. "Alma, I heard about the situation with your sister," he said, his voice grave. "I think we need to talk. There are things about your father's last year that you should know." We agreed to meet at a quiet coffee shop downtown. Stanley, now in his 70s, looked uncomfortable as he settled into the booth across from me. "Your father was my best friend for 30 years, he began. "When he discovered what Bridget was doing, it nearly killed him. Literally, I think. The stress of covering it up, of protecting the firm's reputation, while dealing with his daughter's betrayal, I believe it contributed to his heart attack." "Why didn't he press charges?" I asked, still struggling to process everything. Stanley sighed deeply. He loved her. Despite everything, he loved her and couldn't bear the thought of her in prison, of what it would do to Doug and the grandchildren. So he liquidated his personal investments, took out loans against the business, and quietly replaced every penny she stole. He made me promise to never speak of it. The only reason I'm telling you now is because Bridget is trying to destroy you, and your father would never have wanted that. Is there more?" I could see in his eyes there was. "The affair," he said quietly. "She wasn't just stealing money. She was involved with Martin Chen, our accountant at the time. He helped her hide the embezzlement, created fake vendor accounts, manipulated the books. When your father discovered it all, Martin disappeared overnight. Moved to another state, we heard. I drove home in a daze, the box of evidence on my passenger seat feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Bridget's violent reaction yesterday made perfect sense now. She wasn't just fighting for money, she was fighting to keep her darkest secrets buried. The glass she threw at me was meant to shatter more than just my face. It was meant to shatter my resolve. But now I had the truth, and I had to decide what to do with it. One thing was certain, Bridget's war against me wasn't about justice or fairness. It was about survival. And she had no idea that I now held all the cards. Stanley's revelations had opened a door I couldn't close. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, determined to understand the full scope of my sister's deception. A simple Google search of Martin Chen, accountant, Connecticut, yielded unexpected results. Martin hadn't just disappeared, he had reinvented himself. His LinkedIn profile showed he now worked as CFO of Steadfast Construction in Boston, the very company Doug owned. The coincidence was too perfect to be chance. I called Stanley back immediately. Did you know Martin Chen works for Doug's company now? The silence on the other end told me everything. Finally, Stanley spoke. I suspected but could never prove it. After your father died, I noticed some irregularities in the final audit. Nothing major, but the pattern was familiar. I think Bridget and Martin never stopped their scheme. They just found a new venue. The next 3 days became a blur of investigation that would have made my accountant father proud. I reached out to a forensic accountant friend, Teresa Walsh, who agreed to look at publicly available financial data about Steadfast Construction. What she found was disturbing. The company had grown remarkably fast in the past 5 years, winning major municipal contracts throughout Massachusetts, despite being a relatively small operation. The pattern of growth aligned perfectly with Martin's arrival. Meanwhile, Bridget's attacks on my reputation intensified. She had hired a private investigator named Ross Dalton, who began showing up at my workplace, asking my colleagues probing questions about my mental state and work performance. My boss, Janet Morrison, called me into her office looking concerned. Alma, I don't want to pry into your personal life, but someone is making serious allegations about your stability and trustworthiness. They are claiming you've been exhibiting erratic behavior, and that you manipulated an elderly relative. I know you well enough to find this absurd, but I wanted you to be aware. The harassment didn't stop there. I woke up one morning to find all 4 tires on my car slashed in my apartment's parking garage. The security cameras, conveniently, had malfunctioned that night. Anonymous notes began appearing under my door with messages like "Thieves never prosper," and "The truth will come out." My neighbors started avoiding me in the hallways, clearly having been fed stories about my supposed crimes. Then came an unexpected lifeline. Sophia Reeves, my college roommate who now worked as a corporate attorney in New York, called me out of the blue. "Alma, your sister contacted me last week. She offered me $10,000 to provide a statement about your supposed mental health issues in college. She seemed desperate to find anything she could use against you." Sophia's voice hardened. "I told her exactly where she could shove her bribe, but I thought you should know how far she's willing to go." This revelation shifted something inside me. Bridget wasn't just protecting old secrets, she was actively committing new crimes. I decided to take a calculated risk and hired my own investigator, a former FBI agent named Grace Patterson, who specialized in financial crimes. Within a week, Grace had uncovered a web of corruption that exceeded my worst fears. "Your brother-in-law's company has won 17 major contracts in the past 3 years," Grace reported, sliding a thick folder across my dining room table. In each case, they underbid the competition by exactly the right amount to win, suggesting inside information. More interesting, Each winning bid was preceded by substantial cash deposits to offshore accounts linked to shell companies. Martin Chen's signature is all over the financial structures. Are they bribing officials? I asked, though I already knew the answer. It's a sophisticated operation, Grace confirmed. Martin identifies vulnerable officials, Bridget makes the social connections through charity events and school functions, and the money flows through Doug's company. I'd estimate they've paid out over $2 million in bribes. Your brother-in-law might be innocent, actually. The operation is designed to function without his knowledge, using his company as a front. The scope of my sister's criminal enterprise took my breath away. She had graduated from simple embezzlement to orchestrating a massive corruption scheme. But the most shocking revelation came when Grace showed me photographs from her surveillance. This was taken yesterday outside a hotel in Hartford. The image showed Bridget and Martin in an intimate embrace. The affair never ended. Hotel records show they meet twice a month. I thought about Doug, about their 3 children, about the life Bridget was risking for money and her toxic relationship with Martin. The tragedy of it all nearly overwhelmed me. Then Grace showed me one final piece of evidence that changed everything. I've been monitoring their communications. They are planning something big for you. Look at this text exchange. The messages between Bridget and Martin were chilling. They discussed planting drugs in my apartment, having me arrested, using the chaos to have me declared mentally incompetent and seize control of my inheritance. The plan was set for next week. Martin had already procured the drugs through his criminal connections. They just needed access to my apartment. I sat back, absorbing the full picture. My sister had thrown a glass at my face in rage, but that was just the surface. Underneath lay years of theft, betrayal, corruption, and now a conspiracy to destroy my life completely. She had created an empire of lies with Martin, and I was the only threat to their scheme. The mother who had raised us with such love and values would be devastated to see what Bridget had become. But I wasn't going to be a victim. I had evidence of multiple federal crimes, embezzlement, bribery, conspiracy, adultery that Doug deserved to know about. The question was how to use it. A direct confrontation would lead to mutual destruction. Going to the authorities would destroy Doug and the children alongside Bridget. I needed a strategy that would neutralize the threat while minimizing collateral damage. As I sat there planning my next move, my phone buzzed with a text from my Aunt Helen. You should be ashamed of yourself, trying to steal from your own sister. The irony was so profound I actually laughed. If only they knew who the real thief was. But they would. Soon enough, they would all know the truth. I just had to figure out the right way to serve it. The harassment campaign orchestrated by my sister reached new heights of cruelty over the next week. What started as slashed tires and anonymous notes escalated into a coordinated assault on every aspect of my life. The private investigator Ross Dalton had compiled a dossier of half-truths and outright fabrications that Bridget weaponized with surgical precision. On Monday morning, Janet Morrison called me into her office again, this time with HR representative Michael Watts present. "Alma, we've received a formal complaint," Janet said, sliding a thick document across the desk. "These are serious allegations about your conduct, including claims that you've been using work time to harass family members, and that you may have embezzled funds from your previous employer." My hands shook as I read through pages of lies mixed with just enough truth to sound plausible. They had twisted my caregiving leave for mom into abandonment of duties, painted my grief as mental instability. "This is all fabricated," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "My sister is trying to contest our mother's will and she's desperate to discredit me." Michael's expression remained neutral, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. In corporate America, even false allegations leave stains. They placed me on administrative leave pending an investigation, a polite way of pushing me out while maintaining legal protection. That evening, I found my apartment door slightly ajar. Nothing was stolen, but everything had been subtly disturbed. Books shifted on shelves, drawers not quite closed properly, my laptop moved an inch from where I'd left it. They wanted me to know they'd been there, wanted me to feel vulnerable in my own home. I called the police, but without evidence of forced entry or theft, they could only file a report. The psychological warfare was taking its toll. I stopped sleeping properly, jumping at every sound in the night. My boyfriend Jake, who had been supportive initially, grew increasingly distant. "This is insane, Alma," he said during what would be our last dinner together. "Your family drama is consuming everything. I can't deal with this level of chaos." He left that night, another casualty of Bridget's war against me. But the universe has a way of balancing scales. My salvation came from an unexpected source, Lisa, the cousin who had initially warned me about Bridget's plans. She appeared at my door on Thursday night, looking haggard and carrying a small recording device. "I can't do this anymore," Lisa burst into tears the moment I let her in. "Bridget promised me part of the inheritance if I helped her, said you were really manipulating Aunt Dorothy. I needed the money for my daughter's medical bills. But what she's doing, what she's planning, it's evil." Lisa's confession poured out in a torrent. She had been Bridget's spy from the beginning, reporting on my movements, feeding information to the private investigator. But she had also witnessed conversations that revealed the true depths of Bridget's schemes. "She meets with that Martin guy all the time. They laugh about her husband, about how stupid Doug is. She calls him her useful idiot, who provides the perfect cover for their operations." Then Lisa placed the recording device on my coffee table. "I recorded their meeting yesterday. They think I'm completely loyal, so they spoke freely. You need to hear this." The recording was crystal clear. Bridget's voice, cold and calculating, discussed the plan to plant cocaine in my apartment. Martin's accented English detailed how he'd acquired it through connections from his previous schemes. They debated the amount needed to ensure serious charges, but not trigger federal involvement. "The beauty is," Bridget said on the recording, "even if she doesn't get convicted, the arrest alone will destroy her credibility. No judge will side with a drug addict in an inheritance dispute." Their laughter at this point made my skin crawl. But the recording revealed more than just their immediate plans. They discussed the bribery network, naming specific officials, amounts paid, contracts secured. They mentioned Doug with contempt, how he never questioned the company's suspicious success, because he was too proud of his achievements. Lisa also handed me a flash drive. "These are emails, financial documents, photos from Bridget's personal laptop. She had me back everything up in case something happened to her computer. I made copies." The evidence was overwhelming, years of correspondence with Martin, including intimate messages that would devastate Doug, financial records, showing money movements, lists of bribes paid. "Why are you helping me now?" I asked Lisa, still processing the betrayal and redemption. "Because she's going to destroy everything," Lisa whispered. "My daughter looks up to her cousins, to that family. When this comes out, and it will eventually, those kids will be destroyed. And you don't deserve what she's doing." Aunt Dorothy would be heartbroken to see this. Armed with Lisa's evidence, I contacted my friend Rachel Winters, an investigative journalist who worked for the Boston Globe. Rachel and I had been college roommates before Sophia, and she had gone on to win awards for exposing corruption in construction contracts, ironically enough. When I showed her what I had, her eyes lit up with professional interest. "This is huge, Alma. This isn't just family drama. This is a major corruption scandal. Martin Chen has been linked to similar schemes in Rhode Island and New York. He's like a virus, infecting family businesses through affairs with vulnerable women. Rachel's investigation uncovered Martin's pattern. He had left a trail of broken businesses and destroyed families across New England, always managing to escape just before authorities caught up. We spent days organizing the evidence, creating a timeline that showed how Bridget had evolved from desperate embezzler to willing participant in a criminal enterprise. Rachel discovered that several officials on Bridget's bribery list were already under federal investigation for other matters. "Your sister picked the wrong time to be corrupt," Rachel noted. "The feds are cleaning house in Massachusetts construction contracts." As we worked, the attacks on me continued. My car was vandalized again, this time with spray paint calling me a greedy witch. Someone called my elderly neighbors claiming I was a drug dealer, causing them to petition the building management to evict me. Aunt Helen organized a family meeting specifically to denounce me, which I didn't attend, but heard about from sympathetic relatives, who were beginning to question Bridget's narrative. The breaking point came when I received an anonymous tip that Martin would be entering my apartment the following Tuesday, while I was supposed to be at a fake job interview Bridget had arranged through a friend. The plan was in motion. But now I was ready. I had cameras installed, changed my locks, and made arrangements with Grace Patterson to have surveillance on my building. I also made a decision that would prove crucial. I contacted Doug's brother Samuel, a straight-arrow military veteran, who had always been suspicious of his brother's sudden business success. When I showed him evidence of the bribery and Bridget's affair, his face went stone cold. I knew something was off. Doug's too trusting, but I've been telling him for years that contracts don't just fall from the sky. The pieces were in place for a confrontation that would shatter Bridget's carefully constructed house of cards. She thought she was days away from destroying me. Instead, she was about to face the consequences of years of deception. The girl who threw a glass at my face in rage was about to learn that truth, once unleashed, was far more destructive than any physical weapon. Tuesday arrived with the kind of crisp New England morning that usually filled me with hope. Instead, I sat in my apartment, every nerve on edge, waiting for Martin to make his move. The cameras I'd installed were recording. Grace Patterson's team was stationed outside, and I had backup plans for backup plans. But as the hours ticked by with no sign of intrusion, I began to worry that they'd detected our preparations. Then my phone rang. Rachel's voice was urgent. "Alma, something's happened. Martin was arrested this morning by the FBI. Someone tipped them off about the bribery scheme. The feds are raiding Steadfast Construction right now." My mind raced. This wasn't part of our plan. We had intended to gather more evidence, to control the revelation. Someone had accelerated the timeline, but who? The answer came within hours. Samuel, Doug's brother, appeared at my door looking grim but satisfied. "I couldn't wait," he said simply. "Once I saw what they were doing to my brother's company, using it for their crimes, I went straight to my contact at the bureau. Doug's innocent, but is going to lose everything because of your sister's schemes. I figured better to rip the bandage off quick." The dominoes fell with stunning speed. By evening, news reports showed FBI agents carrying boxes from Steadfast Construction. Martin's arrest photo showed a man whose arrogant confidence had finally cracked. But Bridget remained free. The investigation hadn't yet connected her to the crimes. She called me that night, her voice a mixture of rage and panic. "What did you do?" she screamed. "You destroyed Doug's company. My children's future. All because you couldn't accept that Mom loved me more." "I didn't call the FBI," I said truthfully. "But I know everything, Bridget. The embezzlement from Dad, the affair with Martin, the bribes, all of it. And I have proof. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, in a voice I'd never heard from her before, vulnerable and desperate, he made me do it. Martin. He has videos, photos from our affair. He's been blackmailing me for years. If I didn't help him, he'd send everything to Doug. I couldn't lose my family. For the first time since this war began, I felt a flicker of sympathy for my sister. She wasn't just a villain. She was also a victim, trapped in a web that had started with her own bad choices, but evolved into something beyond her control. But sympathy didn't erase the damage she'd done, or the attacks she'd orchestrated against me. Come to the house tomorrow, I said finally. We need to talk face to face. And Bridget. No more games. No more attacks. It's time for truth. I spent that night preparing for what I knew would be the most important conversation of our lives. I made Mom's pot roast using her exact recipe, the one she'd taught us both when we were teenagers. The familiar smells of rosemary and thyme filled the family home, bringing back memories of happier times, when we were sisters who loved each other, not enemies locked in battle. Lisa had agreed to help one more time, though her role would be different now. She would be my witness, hidden but recording, in case Bridget tried to twist whatever happened into another weapon against me. I also had Rachel on standby, ready to publish her expose if Bridget chose continued war over resolution. The stage was set for a lunch that would either heal our family or destroy it completely. I thought about Mom, about how devastated she would be to see us like this. But I also remembered Dad's hidden note, his anguish over Bridget's betrayal. They had both known the truth and chosen to protect the family rather than pursue justice. Now it fell to me to decide. Would I follow their path of secrecy, or would I finally bring everything into the light? As I stirred the pot roast one final time, testing the seasoning like Mom had taught me, I made my decision. The truth had been buried too long, festering in the dark, poisoning everything it touched. Bridget had thrown a glass at my face in anger, but I would serve her something far more dangerous, the complete, unvarnished truth about what our family had become. Whether she could digest it, or whether it would destroy her remained to be seen. My phone buzzed with a text from Grace Patterson. Martin tried to make a deal. He's offering to testify against everyone involved in exchange for reduced charges. Your sister's name is all over his statement. The walls were closing in on Bridget from all sides. Tomorrow's lunch might be her last chance to take control of her narrative before the justice system did it for her. I set the dining room table with Mom's best china, the wedding set she'd treasured for 40 years. Each plate, each silver fork, carried the weight of family history. As I placed Bridget's setting across from mine, I wondered if this would be the last meal we ever shared as sisters. The pot roast simmered on the stove, its rich aroma a bittersweet reminder of all we had lost and might never recover. But somewhere beneath the anger and betrayal, a small hope flickered. Maybe, just maybe, when all the lies were stripped away, and only truth remained, we could find our way back to being sisters. Not the close relationship we'd once had, but something honest and real. The alternative was too painful to consider, a family permanently shattered, children growing up without cousins, holidays forever fractured. As night fell over Fairfield, I sat in Dad's study one last time, surrounded by the evidence of years of deception. Tomorrow would bring either redemption or final ruin. I thought about the glass Bridget had thrown, how it had shattered against the wall, leaving shards that could never be perfectly reassembled. Our family was like that glass now, broken into pieces. The question was whether we could build something new from the fragments, or whether we'd just keep cutting each other, until nothing remained but scars and regret. Wednesday morning arrived grey and drizzling, matching the somber mood that hung over the family home. I'd been up since dawn, finishing the pot roast and preparing sides. The garlic mashed potatoes Bridget had always loved, green beans with almonds the way Mom made them for special occasions, and the dinner rolls from scratch that took 3 hours, but were worth every minute. If this was to be our last meal as sisters, I wanted it to be memorable. Bridget arrived precisely at noon, looking haggard in a way I'd never seen before. Her usually perfect makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes, or the way her hands trembled slightly as she stood on the doorstep. For a moment, we just looked at each other, two women who shared DNA and decades of memories, but had become strangers. "Thank you for coming," I said, stepping aside to let her in. She nodded stiffly, her eyes scanning the foyer as if expecting a trap. I led her to the dining room where the table was set, the pot roast releasing steam from its serving dish. Her expression softened slightly at the familiar sight. "You made Mom's recipe." "It seemed appropriate," I replied, gesturing for her to sit. "We need to remember who we used to be before we decide who we're going to become." The first few minutes passed in awkward silence as I served the food. Bridget took small bites, her eyes never leaving her plate. Finally, I couldn't stand the tension anymore. "I've been cleaning out Dad's study," I began conversationally. "Found some interesting things in there. Documents he kept hidden." Bridget's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "What kind of documents?" "Letters, mostly. Between you and him. About the money you took from his firm." I kept my voice neutral, watching as the color drained from her face. $300,000, according to his records. He covered it all himself, mortgaged everything to protect his clients and his reputation. "You don't understand," Bridget whispered, setting down her fork with shaking hands. "Doug's business was failing. We were going to lose the house. The kids would have had to change schools. I just needed a bridge loan, something to get us through. I always intended to pay it back." "But you didn't stop there," I continued, pulling out a folder I'd placed beside my chair. "I know about Martin, about the affair that supposedly gave you access to the money. I know it never ended, that you're still seeing him twice a month at the Hartford Marriott." Bridget's face crumpled. "How could you possibly?" "Because unlike you, I didn't rely on intimidation and lies. I hired professionals who uncovered the truth. The bribery network you've been running through Doug's company, the $2 million in kickbacks, the officials you've corrupted. It's all here." I spread photographs across the table, Bridget and Martin embracing outside the hotel, financial documents, showing the money trails, text messages planning their schemes. "He has videos," Bridget said suddenly, her voice breaking. "From the beginning, when I thought it was just an affair. Explicit videos he's held over me for 7 years. If I didn't help him, he'd destroy my marriage. Doug doesn't deserve that. My children don't deserve to see their mother like that." I studied my sister's face, seeing genuine anguish for the first time since this war began. "So you chose to become a criminal rather than face the consequences of your affair. You've never made a mistake." Bridget exploded, some of her old fire returning. "Perfect Alma, devoted daughter, saint of the family. You don't know what it's like to watch your life spiraling out of control, to have someone holding your worst moment over your head like a sword." "No," I agreed quietly. "I don't know that particular pain. But I know what it's like to be accused of elder abuse, to have my reputation destroyed, my job threatened, my tires slashed. I know what it's like to have my own sister try to frame me for drug possession." Bridget's eyes widened. "How did you? Your cousin Lisa grew a conscience. She recorded your planning session with Martin, gave me everything. I know about the cocaine, about the plan to have me arrested. Is that what we've become, Bridget?" Are we really the kind of people who destroy each other over money? Tears were flowing down Bridget's face now, ruining her carefully applied mascara. I didn't know how to stop. Every time I tried to pull away, Martin had something new on me. First the videos, then evidence of the embezzlement, then the bribes. I was trapped, Alma. And yes, I was angry about the will. It felt like one more betrayal, one more thing taken from me. Dad changed his will because he couldn't trust you with money, I said gently. He loved you, but he knew what you were capable of. Mom knew too. They protected you by staying silent, but they protected me by ensuring I had resources you couldn't steal. So what now? Bridget asked, defeat in every line of her body. You have all this evidence. Are you going to the police? The FBI? Doug deserves to know about the affair, I suppose. My children will hate me. I'll probably go to prison. I reached into the folder again, pulling out a different set of documents. Actually, Martin was arrested yesterday. The FBI raided Doug's company. Samuel tipped them off about the bribery scheme. Martin's already trying to make a deal, and your name is all over his statement. Bridget went completely white. Oh God. Oh God, Doug. The kids. What have I done? The question is, what are you going to do now? I said, pushing the final document across the table. This is a draft article by Rachel Winters at the Globe. She has everything, the embezzlement, the affair, the bribes, your attacks on me. It's supposed to publish tomorrow morning unless I tell her otherwise. What do you want? Bridget whispered. Money. The house. I'll drop the will contest, sign whatever you want. I want you to tell Doug the truth. Tonight. All of it. I want you to confess to the authorities before they come for you. I want you to get help, real psychological help, to understand how you became this person. And I want you to make this right, with the family you've poisoned against me. That's all. Bridget looked stunned. You could destroy me completely, and you're offering me a chance to control the narrative. I'm offering you a chance to be the person Mom and Dad hoped you could be, I corrected. To show your children that when we make terrible mistakes, we face them with courage. To give Doug the truth he deserves and the choice about whether to stand by you. To maybe, someday, be my sister again instead of my enemy. Bridget broke down completely then, sobbing into her hands. I'm so sorry, Alma. For everything. The glass, the accusations, all of it. I was so scared and angry and trapped. I convinced myself you were the enemy when really I was fighting myself. I moved around the table, and after a moment's hesitation, put my arms around my sister. She collapsed against me, crying like she hadn't since we were children. I know, I murmured. I know. But it's not too late. You can still choose to be better. Martin's going to prison. The schemes are over. You can finally be free. We sat there for a long time, two sisters holding each other in the dining room where we'd shared thousands of meals, where our parents had taught us right from wrong, where our family had been whole and happy. The pot roast grew cold on the table, but neither of us cared. Finally, Bridget pulled back, wiping her eyes. Will you come with me? When I tell Doug? I don't think I can do it alone. Of course, I said. We're still sisters. That never changed, even when everything else did. As we prepared to leave for the conversation that would shatter Doug's world and potentially save Bridget's soul, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. Yesterday, she had thrown a glass at my face in rage. Today, I had served her lunch and the truth she'd feared more than prison. But sometimes the things we fear most are exactly what we need to face to become free. That evening's confession to Doug remains one of the most painful experiences of my life, and it wasn't even my marriage ending. Bridget sat in her perfect living room, the one she'd nearly destroyed everything to maintain, and told her husband the complete truth. Doug's face went through a spectrum of emotions: confusion, disbelief, rage, and finally, a devastating sadness that seemed to age him 10 years in 10 minutes. 7 years, he kept repeating. 7 years of lies. Our whole life has been built on crimes I didn't even know were happening. When Bridget tried to explain about Martin's blackmail, Doug held up his hand. I need you to leave. Stay at Alma's tonight. I need to think without you here. The children, thankfully at their grandmother's house, were spared witnessing their family's foundation cracking. That night, Bridget slept in our childhood bedroom, curled up in the twin bed under the same pink comforter Mom had bought her for her 16th birthday. I heard her crying through the walls, the same way I'd heard her cry when her first boyfriend broke up with her 20 years ago. Some things never change, even when everything else does. The next morning, she did the hardest thing she'd ever done in her life. We drove together to the FBI field office in New Haven. Bridget's lawyer, a different one this time, had arranged for her to make a voluntary statement. She confessed everything: the embezzlement, the bribery network, how Martin had orchestrated it all while using her need for money and later his blackmail to keep her compliant. The federal prosecutor, a stern woman named Patricia Hartley, listened to Bridget's confession with professional detachment. Your cooperation is noted, Mrs. Conway. The fact that you came forward voluntarily will be taken into consideration. However, you should prepare yourself for the possibility of prison time. I understand, Bridget said quietly. I'm ready to face the consequences. The news broke that afternoon. Rachel's article, modified to reflect Bridget's voluntary confession, painted a complex picture of corruption, blackmail, and family betrayal. But it also highlighted something unexpected: the power of truth to break cycles of deception. The story went viral, not because of the scandal, but because of the redemption arc. People were fascinated by a criminal who chose to confess rather than wait to be caught. Doug, to everyone's surprise, stood by Bridget. Not immediately, and not without conditions. He demanded full transparency, couples counseling, and complete severance from anything connected to Martin or illegal activities. I married you for better or worse, he told her a week after the confession. This is definitely worse. But our children need to see that people can make terrible mistakes and still choose to be better. The legal consequences were serious, but not devastating. Because of her cooperation and the evidence of Martin's coercion, Bridget received 3 years probation and was ordered to pay restitution. Martin, caught with evidence of multiple schemes across state lines, faced 20 years in federal prison. His reign of targeting vulnerable family businesses through seduction and blackmail was finally over. The family reaction was mixed but ultimately healing. Aunt Helen, who had been Bridget's staunchest supporter, was devastated by the truth, but eventually came to understand how wrong she'd been about me. I'm ashamed, she told me at a family dinner 6 months later. I was so quick to believe the worst about you, to think you capable of manipulating Dorothy. Can you forgive a foolish old woman? There's nothing to forgive, I said, meaning it. Bridget was very convincing, and family loyalty is a powerful force. You stood by who you thought was the victim. You just had the wrong sister. The hardest part was explaining to Bridget's children why their life was changing. Doug's company had to be completely restructured, the illegal contracts voided, the dirty money returned. They downsized from their mini mansion to a modest colonial. The kids changed schools. But they also learned valuable lessons about integrity and the courage it takes to admit wrongdoing. 1 year later, at the cemetery on Mom's birthday, Bridget and I stood together at our parents' graves. The pot roast incident, as we'd come to call it, had become a family legend of sorts. The meal that changed everything. The lunch where truth was served as the main course. Do you think they'd be proud of me? Bridget asked, arranging the flowers she'd brought. I think they'd be proud that you finally chose honesty over everything else, I replied. Dad spent the last years of his life carrying your secret. It probably contributed to his heart attack. Mom knew but felt trapped by it. Your confession set everyone free, including them. Bridget nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. I dream about Martin sometimes. Nightmares where he's still controlling me. Dr. Morrison says it's PTSD from years of psychological abuse. I was wrong to steal, wrong to cheat on Doug, but I was also a victim. It's complicated. Most things are, I agreed. But you survived. You're free. Your kids still have their mother. Doug forgave you. That's more than most people get after what you did. Our relationship would never be what it was before. The thrown glass had shattered more than just Aunt Helen's wall. It had broken the easy trust between sisters. But we were building something new, something based on truth rather than assumptions. We had dinner together once a month, always pot roast, always at the family home that I'd decided to keep rather than sell. I used a significant portion of my inheritance to create a foundation for families affected by white-collar crime. The Dorothy Thompson Foundation provided counseling, legal assistance, and financial planning for people whose lives had been destroyed by embezzlement and fraud. Bridget volunteered there, sharing her story with others who'd made similar mistakes, showing them that redemption was possible. 2 years after the confrontation, I met William at one of the foundation's fundraising events. He was a forensic accountant who volunteered his services to help families understand complex financial crimes. Our first date lasted 6 hours, talking about everything from childhood memories to our shared belief in second chances. When I eventually introduced him to Bridget, she pulled me aside. "He's good for you," she said simply. "Don't let my mistakes make you afraid to trust. You deserve happiness." Standing at my wedding 3 years later, Bridget served as my matron of honor. It was a controversial choice that some family members questioned, but it felt right to me. She had been with me through the worst of life. She deserved to share in the best. In her toast, Bridget said something that stayed with me. "Alma taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is force them to face the truth." She could have destroyed me with what she knew. Instead, she saved me from myself. That's what real sisters do. Looking back now, I understand that the glass Bridget threw at my face was actually a gift. It shattered the illusion that our family was perfect, that success mattered more than honesty, that secrets could stay buried forever. The next day, when I served her lunch and the truth she feared, I wasn't seeking revenge. I was offering her the chance to stop running from herself. The truth we fear most is often the key to our liberation. Bridget discovered that when the weight of her secrets finally lifted, she could breathe again. Our family discovered that forgiveness is possible even after profound betrayal. And I discovered that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to be silent in the face of injustice, even when the perpetrator is someone you love. Our mother's pot roast recipe, passed down through generations, had brought our family together countless times. But that particular lunch, served with a side of unvarnished truth, had been the most important meal of our lives. It was the day we stopped being victims of our secrets and started being authors of our redemption. And that, more than any inheritance, was Dorothy Thompson's greatest gift to her daughters. What would you do if you discovered a loved one's devastating secret? Would you protect them or expose them? Would you choose family loyalty or justice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about families facing impossible choices. And remember, sometimes the hardest truths lead to the greatest freedoms. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that redemption is possible, even after the worst mistakes. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and may you always have the courage to face your truth, no matter how much you fear it.